Dr. MacClements, thanks for joining us. We're reading in the news that there's a growing drug shortage. What's causing this?
Well, there seems to be a drug shortage in medications that are used intravenously, like antibiotics and chemotherapeutic agents. And there's several reasons. One of them is that some of the pharmaceutical companies are no longer making them. There's not enough profit margin. There seems to be a redistribution of medications to certain parts of the country, and so there's shortages arising. And there's an increased demand from the patients as a whole.
How many drugs are in short supply?
Well, depending on who you read, there are as many as about 350 at one time. This has certainly increased in the last few years. They seem to have got the number under control since about October last year, when President Obama put in an executive order to have the FDA address this issue.
You mentioned this, but what kind of drugs are being impacted?
Well, it's all the drugs that are in high demand at the moment, and those that used to be generic. So the antibiotics are on the list, intravenous medications, intravenous fluids, nutritional medications that are given intravenously. There have been some common medications like anti-anxiety medications and anesthetic medications that have been in short supply.
What's being done about the problem?
Well, there's been a big investigation by the FDA. An executive order was passed last year by President Obama, and he's tasked the FDA to look into why these shortages are occurring, to try and use this regulatory agency to identify where the log jams are, and has given them the permission and the power to remove any impediments that are so as to ensure that these medications reach the patients.
Inconvenience or crisis? How serious is this problem?
At the moment, it's more of an inconvenience. You know, depending on which specialty you're in, there's been certain oncologists who've been concerned that some of their medications that they would like to use for patients have not been available, so they've used other alternatives. But at this time, there have been alternatives that physicians can use to treat patients.
Is this a United States phenomenon, or does it extend beyond the United States elsewhere in the world?
No, it extends throughout the world. Canada has been impacted. Clearly, all the nations in the third world are constantly impacted by a shortage of medications. This is something, though, that's a little unusual for us in the United States.
How will this impact cost?
Well, that's one of the tasks that the administration has given the FDA to ensure does not occur, that the marketplace does not drive up the cost of medications. There is that fear that when there's a shortage and there's supply and demand, that the costs may go up. The FDA has been tasked to ensure that that doesn't occur, and that there's no price fixing, and that the medications are readily available. And with that in mind, they've been working with the pharmaceutical companies to address which medications they're short of, why they're having difficulty producing them, and ensuring that any regulations that had been in place before that were slowing down the manufacturing of these drugs would be moved out of the way.
If I'm a patient taking a particular medication or a particular drug, how can I find out if it's on that list?
Well, the FDA has a website that you can go to that's readily accessible, and it lists the medications that are on shortage. They also do show you what the status of the medications. The good news is it seems that medications that were in short supply, they've addressed where the concerns are, what the issues are, and the majority of them now are moving forward and are more readily available.
If a patient is faced with a medication that's in short supply, what can he or she do?
Well, probably the best is to address the issue with their physician, because there are alternatives to various medications that can be utilized. There are various classes that have multiple drugs within the class, or one could use a different class of medication, and your physician can work with your local pharmacist to ensure that you get the necessary medication.
Do you see this issue as being chronic, going on for a long time, or is it going to resolve?
Well, hopefully it'll resolve. There's the number of issues that have been that have arisen that have caused this concern hopefully will be addressed. Part of the problems were that a lot of the pharmaceutical companies stopped making generic medications because there wasn't any profit margin in it, and that's being reviewed. We've always had that concern when it's come to vaccinations. We had that issue a few years ago, and the FDA intervened, and you know, that issue got resolved, and now we don't have a shortage of vaccinations. So the hope is that the FDA will continue to work with all the pharmaceutical partners, work with the healthcare industry, be able to predict or anticipate where the shortages are, and ensure that the medications are readily available.
Very well. Doctor, thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thank you.